Okay, friends, buckle up, because you have found yourself in a room with both a mom and a minister on a Mother's Day Sunday, and I have thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts. I've tried to put them in some order. I have reached for ones, that feel like they're needed by more than just the moms among us. But mostly I have to confess, I have thoughts that feel personal and a few beliefs that feel hard-won. I want to talk about things that I was surprised to realize as an adult and insights I had to take in over some time. My hope is to just steer us off the beaten path a little bit and a little further down the road, out of the well-worn and familiar territory of Mother's Day. But at the same time, I don't want to make moms feel any less important because I don't want to dwell on selflessness and sacrifice. What I do want really is to dwell on our collective image of God. I want to expand that and tell you why it could help us value the work of mothering more if we do. Because my first hot take, I think it is high time that the church made room to celebrate more and different kinds of mothering on more than one day. And I think it's past time we create and give our children a picture of God that includes all the feminine work mothers do. So first up, it is a beautiful and appropriate idea to recognize moms. And I tell you right now, I'm not giving back my yellow tulips. I love that I got them. But I think we can too easily use Mother's Day to shortchange mothering on all the other days. I'm not picking on us in the room or in this church. I'm not against any of the efforts we make, the drawings, the flowers, the chocolates. All of it matters and all of it is good. I'm speaking more broadly, culturally. I'm acknowledging that jobs dominated by women already tend to be undervalued and underpaid. This is fact, sociological fact. And then we add on top of that a holiday that celebrates and idealizes a back-breaking amount of labor as simply what moms do. You know, this is the mom way, and this is why you get the thanks. If we are not very careful and quite thoughtful, I think we can reinforce a lopsided, uneven way of living and seeing the world. I want you to think for a minute about the different kind of cards sold in stores for Mother's Day versus Father's Day. Everybody loses in this, is my theory. For Father's Day, you get jokes and light disrespect. I mean, there's really not a lot of, you have held me up. You are the wind beneath my wings for fathers. But for moms, every card is emotionally heavy. I just checked out 2 online. Thank you for being there every day of my life, Mom, with exactly what I needed every time. What? I think that might be a lie. Next card I found that really bugged me. All that I am is because of you, Mom. Well, geez, I hope not. Because I kind of want more for my people than to only be what I can give them. I kind of want more than that. And I kind of don't want to be the sole responsible party for the offspring's emotional well-being. Absolutely, as a category, we owe the moms. We owe our moms, all of us. We should recognize their unique and irreplaceable roles in our lives. But what we owe the mothers in the trenches of child raising isn't just special occasion praise for some huge effort that we then normalize. If we as a group, as a rule, did more to see and support moms along the way, that'd help a lot more than a Hallmark card. Because the work of nurturing was never meant for one class of human beings alone. I've come to believe, and this is hot take number 2, it's pretty controversial, establishing a day to gift our mothers might have been an act too small. Might just not be enough. I came to that conclusion a couple of years after I learned about the very first call for a Mother's Day in the United States. I was looking into the history of the thing, and I came across a lady named Julia Ward Howe, Howe. I think you should look her up. There you will find the story of an iconoclast woman, a lady whose life spanned most of the 19th century, whose marriage was complicated, whose own children meant the world to her, but whose work and presence and advocacy was for a world of children, tiny and grown. Her idea of a Mother's Day, written down and proclaimed in 1870, was a day of peace, a day to stop all wars worldwide and consider what it would take to make sure that no woman ever again raised a baby who would be killed in the violence of war. And who did Julia think could accomplish this not small task? Well, women. Women working together across the globe. That's pretty revolutionary. That is an amazingly bold thought for the year 1870. And also, truth be known, some of Julia's language is pretty harsh towards the males. If she sees the moms as a positive force, well, there is another side to that. This divide that she makes between the male and the female spheres, I don't know if it's fair, but I'm pretty sure it was true to her 1800s experience. So in calling for a Mother's Day, Julia Ward Howe wrote, "Arise, all women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, and say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall no longer be taken from us to unlearn all that we've been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and love. We, women of one country, will be too tender to those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now be summoned into a great and earnest day of council. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead. Let them then solemnly take counsel with one another as to the means whereby this great human family can live in peace, each bearing the sacred impress not of Caesar, but of God." Each bearing the sacred impress not of Caesar, but of God. Here's the genius of Julia, big idealistic thinker whose time had not yet come and has still not yet come. She related mothering directly to God, to the quality and character of God. She saw clearly where it all comes from, the care that we take with our own, the compassion we can be moved to feel for other people. That is God in us, causing us to see God in the others. In Julia's mind, only God could stir hearts to bewail the dead and also be too tender to train future generations to harm one another. Those expressions of God, specifically, she saw in mothers. There's just one deep problem that Julia was a product of and not the cause of. The way God shows up in humankind should never have been gendered. God should not have been split into male versus female qualities, because God is a lot bigger than that. God is, in fact, beyond gender. But the act did happen somewhere along the way. At some point in the collecting and codifying of sacred texts, the we of Genesis became a he. So that the dominant picture, what gets passed along and valued most highly, is an image of God as a man. In Genesis 1:26, the voice of God says, "Let us make humans in our image, according to our likeness." Or, "Let us make humankind to resemble us." And just one verse later, we read, "Male and female, God created them." The first recorded act of God is the birthing of the whole world. And then the creation of humanity in God's own forms, in God's own diverse forms. The biggest thing imaginable created smaller things, each bearing the bigger's imprint. This was done with infinite care and variety, with plans, with systems that would nurture and grow things. A system in which multiple larger forces would always work together for the sake of the smallest and most dependent. Life has always been like that, collective and interdependent like that. From the plants that depend on the sun and the rain to animals that group together to raise their young. Life has always been a group project. And if we or they was the most fitting pronoun for God in the beginning, he was simply the one most often applied. And when men made that decision and let that happen, we all missed out on some essential picture in the big mosaic of God. For one thing, if mothering is God's own creative work, then it's for all of us who were made by God. The biggest lifts of it, the most costly sacrifices of it, they might lean one direction. That might just be true. But the work of it shouldn't be exclusive to just half of us. Absolutely, there are gender differences and distinct roles in parenting. And being a father or a mother, they aren't interchangeable things. But nurture is the work of all humankind. We know this if we think about it. We see it all the time because we know that women who didn't birth us helped raise us. We know that men too have supported and cheered for us, have mentored us, have nurtured us. We know that our parental influences go further than mom and dad. Not all that we are is due to one person, as a matter of fact. We've all had coaches, teachers, church moms, youth group sponsors, a whole community of people who have poured into us and helped love us into being. We might call it mentoring, but really that's just mothering in the most biblical way. The deepest form of mothering is any action taken on another's behalf. Any action that puts someone else first and lifts someone else up. And the best example of that kind of action is a loving, nurturing God. So I started with Julia Ward Howe, woman to know today. I'll give you another woman reference. Some 500 years before Julia lived, a woman named Julian of Norwich lived in religious isolation in the England of the Middle Ages. She was an ordinary, unmarried, childless woman who also saw beyond her own lived experience and time. She saw visions of God as mother, in addition to God's role as father. Julian wrote a book. It is the first book in the English language written by a woman about a number of showings, that's her word, or visions she received from Jesus. These caused her to reimagine her picture of God. And in this book, Julian wrote, I saw 3 ways to look at the motherhood of God. The first is that she created and birthed our human nature. The second is that she took our human nature upon herself, which is where the motherhood of grace begins. And the third is that motherhood in action in which she spreads herself throughout all that is, extending to the fullest length and breadth, height and depth. That's a translation from the original Old English, but these words, by the way, were written before the year 1400. And Julian's telling us that the word mother helps her explain what she means by the word God. She is saying that mothering is so primal an action for humans to take. It's so big and wide, so high and deep, that it applies beyond our own mothers. It applies to the source of our mothers. To say that only mothers do the mothering is to put them in a container too small. The full picture of mother can only be applied to God. That's a pretty revolutionary thought for the time, too. It's original, but also it's orthodox to say that mother is a descriptor for God. I know that can be jarring and bothering when you first hear God, our mother. I know that we sang it today. That was a really purposeful choice. And I do not mean to offend anyone with it. It was a purposeful, considered choice that we tried to offer gently. It just may be that it's jarring to hear God, our mother, because you're not used to hearing anything female about God at all. You've been conditioned not to. But friends, it's always been there. Many of the prophets, the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, and Jesus himself embody things that we would call traditionally feminine qualities: mercy and compassion, mother love and care. God is even described throughout the Old Testament as a compassionate mother, as a hen protecting her chicks, even as the breasted one, or El Shaddai. Okay, I know that was a record scratch for all you children of the 80s who listened to Amy Grant, and you know that song, El Shaddai, and you know very clearly that it says, age to age, he's still the same by the power of his name. So what am I even talking about? In Hebrew, El Shaddai is taken to mean God Almighty, but it's two words layered with meaning, and that second word has different multiple contexts. El just means God. Shaddai can mean all-powerful, but a very legitimate interpretation of it goes back to the Hebrew word for breast. It works for both the breast of a mother or the breast of a personified people. It can be literal for a form of nurture, or it can be symbolic for being at the center of attention and care. So it is not wrong to say that this very ancient term for God, El Shaddai, suggests feeding and safety, protection and nurture, mothering. That picture would have made complete sense for how ancient people understood their and our God. The prophet Hosea quotes God as saying, "It was I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them up in my arms. I led them with the cords of human kindness, with bands of love. I was to them like those who lift infants to their cheeks. I bent down to them, and for my own body I fed them." That's chapter 11, verses 3 and 4, and it sure sounds like a description of infant mothering. We know already that God is likened to a bird in the Bible. Did you know that one of the most famous places, Isaiah 40, where God will lift you up on eagle's wings, is a reference to what mama eagles do? They put the babies on their back and fly so the babies can draft just above them, and if the babies falter, they will fall on the mom's wings. That's a mama eagle reference there. When David in Psalm 17 is on the run and weary, he asks God to tuck him in close. "Hide me, O Lord, in the shadow of your wing." And then in Matthew and in Luke, Jesus says that he has longed to gather the little chicks of Israel to himself as a mother gathers her chicks under her wing. These are not accidental metaphors. They weren't slipped in by radical women for equal representation. If anything, they've been ignored and suppressed on purpose. But they've been there all along. They've been there all along. Father, Mother, God. Always the same, always both. And woo, I know that was a lot. And I deeply appreciate you coming on this road trip with me. If you've gotten this far and you're just wondering, so what is the good news here? I think you're asking exactly the right question. What I find to be the best good news in a wider picture of God and women's roles is that no matter who we are, we get to look at God and see something of ourselves. However we don't fit into our expected roles, or however we do and have fit into a role only too well to our own detriment, we can look at God and recognize something of our divine and valuable selves. We are each in the pictures God paints of God's self. And that makes every last one of us, each class or group of us, and the care we offer to the world, equally indispensable, equally beloved. More good news, what we do to care for one another is not small work, and it is not second-class work. It was never meant to be thankless or unseen. It was meant to be modeled and proliferated because it is the very work of God. Mothering is not a thing we need to lift up one day a year and then take advantage of all the other days. It is the all the time, creative, loving, constant labor of God we are every one of us invited into. This is, by the way, how I see what I do as a minister. It's how I would most succinctly describe what ministry is. It's participating in the nurture of the world with God. It is watering the world along with God. On this day especially, I lift up the biggest possible image of God. I lift up your work of seeing yourself reflected there. And I invite you to appreciate the ways women particularly have and do reflect the identity of God and the way God is reflected in those who mother. Amen.